Thank you, sir, and to everyone, magandang umaga ho sa inyong lahat. You know, the key to strengthen the Philippines position, not only in our regional Asian neighboring countries, but in the eyes of the whole world, is to strengthen our economy. No? And we cannot strengthen our economy if we have a failing transportation sector. No? That's what this administration is currently doing. There is a study made by JICA that something to the tune of 3.5 to 4 billion pesos is being lost due to the traffic situation alone, and that's daily. No? So President Marcos, I'm calling him the father of the railway sector in our country, because he was the one really who put up the vision and the political will to move all of these railway projects forward. We are doing LRT 1 and LRT 2 expansion, as all of you are aware. We are doing MRT expansion also. We're developing new lines both for the LRT 1, both for the LRT and the MRT. At the same time, we're also doing the Metro Manila subway, as all of you are aware. And of course, there is that PNR modernization and PNR railway system that we're currently constructing. This is a 147-kilometer stretch from Clark in Pampanga, and it goes south. From Pampanga, it goes to Bulacan, and from Bulacan, it goes to Metro Manila. It goes in and around Metro Manila. It's elevated, and then it goes down, upgrade, and then it dives down, and side by side. It goes with the Metro Manila subway, and it goes back up again as it goes south from Alabang all the way to Calamba, Laguna. It truly is an engineering marvel. And while we're constructing, and for the safety of our commuters and our workers, we have unfortunately made the difficult decision to do the stoppage in Metro Manila. This was decided March 28 was the last day that we are running our trains in Metro Manila. And I've said this over and over in previous interviews. Ang sabi ko po, humihingi ng paumanhin at humihingi ng konting pasensya ang Philippine National Railways sa temporary na pagsasara dito sa Metro Manila, lalong-lalo na sa mga apektado nating mga kababayan, mga sumasakay ng tren. In Metro Manila alone, 25 to 30,000 people are affected with this stoppage. However, pag natapos naman itong construction and we target a construction date of 2028. And this is very realistic. We know we can meet the target date only because from Pampanga to Valenzuela is more than one half finished. Imagine, the stations are 80 to 85% finished. So it's doable, and our target is reachable, and once fully constructed, it can accommodate up to 800,000 passengers daily. Just the PNR line alone. Kaya nga po, ang sabi ko, and please, if there is something you want to write this one, ang sabi ko, pagbalik ng PNR, bagong mukha, bagong pag-asa, at bagong Pilipinas ang ibibigay nito sa mga kababayan natin sa buong Pilipinas. And It also provides us an opportunity to develop, expand, and construct the southern line in Bicol. While we're stopping, while there's stoppage, we're still here, and our people are still here. No? So we're expanding. Currently, we opened the line from Laguna, no, to Quezon, from Quezon to Bicol, from Bicol all the way to Legazpi, to Legazpi City. From Legazpi City, we're going to take it all the way south to Sorsogon. No? So that's only in southern Luzon. And as all of you know, the President also, he in a speech in Davao that he delivered a few months back, he ordered the DOTR to look for funding for the Mindanao project. No? And I'm very excited to announce that there are several interests, no? Coming from several countries, several proponents who wanted to propose the Mindanao Railway. Of course, it's under review, it's under study by Secretary Jimmy Bautista of DOTR. Just quickly, I cannot stress this enough, no? But Secretary Jimmy is our leader, he is our inspiration, and I don't think, or President Marcos could not have picked a better person, to fulfill his aspirations for the country than Secretary Jimmy. He comes from the private sector and he understands the needs of the private community or the business community. And then, of course, that will provide jobs and opportunities for the people. It trickles down. No? I guess that's that. That's my update, but I'm open to questions. No? And I would love to participate also in the discussion on the West Philippine Sea because I don't know if you're aware, I'm the son of a former mayor of Olongapo City, Teddy Macapagal. No? And when I was young, I was growing up together with the Subic Bay or Subic Naval Base in Olongapo. So I'm a bit interested and also familiar with the balance of power issue, no? In the West Philippine Sea. But anyway, I would love to open up this forum for questions. Okay lang po ba, sir? To answer any questions?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
But anyway, siguro pa ang tanong ko muna sa inyo. Alam naman natin na itong pinagiging project, ilan dito, nung una, dapat na mag-pondo China banks o Chinese government. Hindi na tuloy kasi exorbitant ang mga kondisyon at saka yung interest rate na meron pang non-disclosure agreement. Kung nalipat sa ibang financing institution, magkano ang natipid ninyo? Nagawa natin yung tagapan siya natin.
Sir, napakagandang malaki po ang natipid ng Pilipinas nung nailipat from Chinese Chinese agreement, no, to the Japan loan. Ang tawag po dyan is an ODA loan, Official Development Assistance Loan. At ang interest lamang po ay 0.05% annually. No? Ganyan po kagaling na partner ang JICA, and it's jointly funded by JICA and the Asian Development Bank, ADB, to the tune of 875 or 76 billion pesos, no? Just for the PNR alone. Then you also have that other lines, the Metro Manila Subway, which is also funded by the same lending institution. No? So, other countries have also signified interest. They have also came up with almost the same offer. No? Pero yung China, in fairness to the current president, nireview naman niya yung Chinese proposal together with Secretary Bautista pag dating ho natin sa administration. Yun lang, China also, I think, wanted out of the agreement. So it's a mutual decision made by both countries.
Nung Japan na po ang mag-refinance ng project, totoo po bang naiwasan ng pagkakaroon natin ng multi-gauge track? So ngayon, almost standard. Yung trend sa south at sa north, pwede magpalitan. Unlike yung masunod yung China, may problema, pati basura.
Siguro ganito na lamang ang sasabihin ko. Mas flexible ang naging terms when JICA came in. Kasi the previous one, masyadong strict. Now you have to adhere strictly to yung mga conditions ng former country. But now that it's more flexible and they have the consultancy group, then other countries are also open and they're also welcome to participate. We have Singapore contractors, we have European contractors, we have French, you call us sales. All of these other countries, they're here and they're supporting the railway system only because the Japanese proposal or the Japanese offer and the Japanese agreement with the Philippines is much more flexible and much more open.
Alam naman natin na I grew up in Quezon Province. Kaya alam ko kung basta yung paligid ng tren, maraming informal settlers. Paano po susolusyonan yung mga milyon-milyon na nakatira sa gilid ng Reyes?
Magandang tanong po yan. Yan po ang challenges ngayon, na hinihimay ng administrasyon natin. Hindi lamang, he mentioned, kasama ho natin, he mentioned Quezon, but we're building it in Metro Manila, all the way to Laguna. Naku, napakarami yung challenges on the ROW, the right-of-way issues. But it's a case-to-case basis. Ang sabi ni Pangulo at ni Secretary, kung sila ay tiga Pampanga, ililipat sila Pampanga. Kung sila ay tiga Laguna, ililipat sila in Laguna. So, ang priority, of course, is in-city or in-province relocation. But in other areas, unfortunately, baka mahirap gawin yun. That's why may kaakibat po na konting livelihood assistance. Hindi lamang yung paglilipat to resettlement areas. So, ang ginawa ho ng ating mahal na Pangulo, he created by executive order a committee composed of several cabinet secretaries, which he announced a few days ago. And kami po, ang mga lieutenants ng o mga sundalo ng Kidro 8 na yan will go down and will talk to the people on the ground. At I promise you, while I'm here, and I'm leading the efforts, na I will be, let's use the word, sisikapin ko, na makausap at magkaroon ng magandang understanding between the informal settlers and the government at kung ano man ang issue na dapat i-resolve. However, I have to stress the importance of creating this project and completing this project. Kasi pag na-complete po ito, ang makikinabang dito are the future generation of Filipinos. Dapat nga, this would have been built yesterday pa. Dapat noon pa yan na modernize ang railway system ng Pilipinas. Every developed country in the world has a developed railway system. Tayo huli. But we're doing it now and we're 100% intent in resolving all these issues so that we can complete it with the target time that was set forth to us by President Marcos.
Yung right of way issue yata ang main obstacle at this point. Ano yung mga problematic areas na Metro Manila?
Very good question. Yung pong Pampanga at yung Bulacan, just to give you a perspective, yung pong Pampanga at yung Bulacan, that's over 50% finished, and yung mga stations are over 85 to 90% finished. Ang ibig sabihin po niyan, kung bakit natatapos yan, ibig sabihin, ang right-of-way issues in the north line is almost resolved. I'm not saying that it's 100% resolved, it's almost resolved. Dito sa Metro Manila, we started track removal activities. And we've also started fencing activities. So, nilalagyan na ng mga fences at inaalis na yung mga old trucks na papalitan ng mga bago. In fact, i-elevate yan or ibabagsak yan to the Metro Manila, to the subway line. No? So, what does it mean? It means construction will have to come next. No? And obviously, we cannot construct until merong clearing operations. That's why, sir, case-to-case basis. Pero ang problema talaga nasa Metro Manila. Dahil nakita nyo naman, Metro Manila is, siksikan. Oo. Wala tayong areas to move people outside. In fact, if we can just move the people outside of Metro Manila, it will be easier for us to construct. No? Kaya nga ho, kailangan kausapin isa-isa at kailangan bumaba ang mga kami at mga kasama namin sa gobyerno to talk to the people of the ground para iba-iba ang problema ng bawat lugar. Ibawa, itong barangay na ito, itong problema, itong barangay na ito, itong problema. And then also, I want to stress that we need the cooperation and we need the support, really, the support of the local government units of LGU. Sila po ang secret, ang key to unlock this problem. That's why sila Mayor ng Metro Manila and sila Barangay Captain, under, of course, the Department of DILG, Interior and Local Government, we need your support. Kung nakikinig kayo, tulungan po ninyo kami para ma-resolve itong right-of-way issues that currently, umpisahan na namin gawin in Metro Manila all the way to the south in Laguna.
Ito po ba train nyo yung mga tube train pa o electrified trucks na?
Very good question. At tawag po namin dyan, home along the realest trains. No? Yan ang current trains natin eh. Pag dumadaan yan, yung mga bahay. No? But sir, I'm very proud to say, and maybe this is an announcement, okay, that we are now doing away with the old diesel locomotive trains. No? The Philippine National Railways have procured 60 passenger, or it's called commuter trains, all electric trains from Japan. No? And it's hindi na sir, these are all state-of-the-art, modern, the most modern and sophisticated trains coming from Japan, provided by Mitsubishi.
I was going to ask, gano'ng katagal bago tayo magkaroon ng bullet train dito sa Metro Manila or even to the provinces? Ang China, maabot ng 300 kilometers per hour. Tayo yata, fastest is 160.
Yung pinupiro natin, the fastest one is 160 kilometers per hour. But that's point to point, from Clark Airport to Metro Manila Airport na naiya. No? So, lalo mo namin, magpapatakbo kami, siguro isang madaling araw, isang tanghali, isang gabi na hindi yan titigil sa mga istasyon at tawag mo dyan express trains from airport in Clark to the airport in Manila. No? But these regular trains, or most of these newly procured trains will be running at 130 kilometers per hour because it will stop in every stations in Pampanga, in Bulacan, Metro Manila, and Laguna. A total of 35 stations. No? These stations, by the way, like halimbawa, you are in Bulacan, Balagtas, Bulacan, or Valenzuela in Metro Manila. No? These stations, by the way, will be the center of trade in these areas. Kasi magkakaroon yan ng mga land component, land development component, thereby, magkakaroon ng mga restaurants and malls and other areas of growth, or economic growth in these different stations. That's at least what we are envisioning moving forward.
Kasi sa Asia, dalawa yung sikat na may train. Ito boring, Japanese train line. Kasi hindi na-relate. Na boring. Excited yung Chinese. Kasi ang libangan, maguguan. I mean, gaano kasi ito gagawin natin train? Kasi kung Chinese standard gagamitin natin, buwan pa nagkako tayo na patay.
Japanese po itong natin. First of all, yung riles, ang gagawa ko niyan is Colas Rails, no? / Hitachi. Okay? So, Japanese and French, no? Yung mga stations po natin are all elevated, but we have foreign contractors na gagawa niya. South Korea, you have POSCO, you have Hyundai, no? Indonesia, you have Adhikaria, no? You have Spanish, Acciona, no? So all of this general contractors, they have an experience na, no, in doing these types of projects in the past. But also, I want to stress this, it is very important. We want to acquire the technology. That's why meron tayong Philippine Rail Institute, the PRI, no? Philippine Railway Institute, and the technology that we have acquired from all these different countries who are building the NSER will pass on this technology to the PRI so that our local engineers will then get the technology. No? So, wala akong dapat ikatakot ng mga kababayan natin. In fact, before we start operations, magkakaroon kami ng mga trial runs. And we're projecting the trial run to happen sometime in 2027 so that by 2028, we should be in full operational mode. Yun ang target.
Sige. Meron ba tayong video ulit? Okay. Siguro, we'll go back to this issue later on. At this point, I'd like to ask our two professors, Professor Don McLean, McLean Gill of De La Salle University, and there's also Professor Renato De Castro, International Studies Professor. Can you give us an overall view of what's happening sa Washington, D.C., yung trilateral meeting between the U.S. and Japan? Sige, who wants to share some? Sige.
Maraming pong salamat, and it's a great pleasure to be here. Great to join Mr. Chairman, of course, Professor De Castro, a great inspiration. Now, when we try to understand kung ano pong, nangyari sa Washington, D.C., especially the trilateral, which was the first of its kind, we have to understand yung context niya. Okay? So this trilateral emerged at a time kung saan may proliferation or may spread na mga ilang established trilaterals or minilaterals na kung sinasabi, which are area-specific arrangements from and by particular countries with shared interests. So meron po tayong Quad with US, Japan, Australia, and India. Meron po tayong AUKUS, which is the Australia, UK, US arrangement. And we have yung trilateral po ng US, Japan, and South Korea. So trilateral po natin, the US, Philippines, Japan trilateral, comes at a time kung kailan, when the security conditions of the Indo-Pacific, particularly in maritime domain, the West Philippine Sea, the East China Sea, cross-strait relations, are continuously being provoked by particular narrowly driven interests of our northern neighbor. Now, given this reality, and given yung proactivity po natin under President Marcos Jr., kung saan po clear na the Philippines wants to take up its own agency in the region, dito po natin may kita ang initiative ng Philippines to take part proactively, to contribute significantly in securing the rules-based order as a stakeholder ng region na ito. So, itong trilateral po talks about a multi-pronged approach in establishing this three-way as a stabilizing force sa Indo-Pacific. We have to take into account that this is an emerging arrangement. So, traditionally po, we function under yung tinatawag na hub-and-spoke system, which means that unlike sa Europe, which is collective security, sa Indo-Pacific naman, what we have are bilateral treaty alliances between the U.S. and its partners. So the U.S.-Philippines NDP, for example, the U.S.-Japan, U.S.-South Korea, U.S.-Australia. Pero itong trilateral na ito is an indication na three democracies, the Philippines, Japan, and the United States, want to do more beyond yung existing or traditional framework ng cooperation nila. And this calls for more integration at a time when multiple risks na face natin tatlo, and of course at the same time multidimensional ang challenges na nakikita natin from all fronts. So, going to the main trilateral agreement, bakit po significant ito? Well, first of all, we have to understand that maritime security or yung security ng maritime domain natin in the Indo-Pacific region was front and center sa discussion na ito. And I think that based sa vision statement ng tatlong leaders, President Marcos Jr., President Biden, and Prime Minister Kishida, very clear na po na there's a need to adhere to the 2016 arbitral ruling, UNCLOS, international law, and of course, meron pong inintroduce na, the promotion of more multilateral exercises or trilateral rather exercises in the maritime domain. Actually, I think this is the first time nagkaroon ng 1+1+1 arrangement. Usually we have the 2+2. Na kapag, for example, yung defense minister and foreign minister ng isang country meets with the defense minister and foreign minister ng another country. So, between two partners. Now we have it as a three-way. And this is a good implication na all three democracies are willing to consolidate efforts further, to address these emerging challenges. In addition to that, may intent din na institutionalize ang maritime cooperation sa maritime domain. What does that mean? Kapag ini-institutionalize ang isang level of cooperation, make sure na magpa-persist ito. And what we have is that throughout the years, meron po tayong naging issue when it comes to consistency in applying our foreign policy, particularly in the West Philippine Sea. This has been spanning since the 70s. Whether it is because of our foreign policy decisions, whether it is dahil sa certain limitations or loopholes ng alliance dynamics, or whether it is the unwillingness or the lack of realization in Manila to leverage yung position po natin sa mapa, which is absolutely strategic and absolutely important. Today, we are seeing this being addressed, particularly under the administration of President Marcos Jr., kung saan po na-realize natin na hindi lang po tayo marginal player sa Indo-Pacific. Tayo po ay napaka-importanting player when it comes to stabilizing the rules-based order in the region. And with that realization, that proactivity, dito natin makikita na Manila is more than willing to do more in terms of engaging with our partners. So meron po tayong expansion of traditional and non-traditional partners. And of course, if you all remember, when President Marcos Jr. Was newly inaugurated, sinabi po nila na I would want to enhance the scope of the alliance, make it more fitting based on emerging challenges. And I think that this is a clear, consistent take on what President Marcos Jr. has emphasized since the beginning of his administration. So meron po tayong continuity in this regard. And on top of that, the Maritime Security Trilateral Partnership and base sa vision statement also emphasized the need of this new trilateral to integrate itself amongst the other trilaterals and multilaterals and minilaterals in the region. So nandun po sa vision statement that the trilateral would be embedded among other important arrangements. Nandun po yung Quad na na-mention ko earlier, the AUKUS, and the US, Japan, South Korea trilateral, which shows na there is more willingness to forge network-based diplomacy between and among like-minded countries. And this is very important. Now, the third point that I'd like to make is pagdating na po sa collective and individual resilience. And I think that being equitable partners, right, realizing that all three countries have equal stakes in the region, merong clear focus na kailangan natin i-build ang collective and individual resilience natin. And this is very important. Given, of course, pragmatically speaking, the Philippines trails behind in terms of economic and defense capabilities. And realizing this particular discrepancy, our partners in Tokyo and Washington have emphasized their willingness na i-boost ang capabilities natin in this slide. So in terms of defense, meron pong in-introduce the bill, a bipartisan bill in U.S. Congress worth $2.5 billion to enhance Philippine defense capabilities to fast-track yung Philippine military modernization program natin, which is in line with the passing of the budget by President Marcos Jr. and of course the reinvigorated political will to keep the security of our sovereignty and sovereign rights at the heart of Philippine foreign policy based on international law. Napakahalaga po dito. Second to that is, of course, the realization na the Philippines needs to be more resilient pagdating sa economic realm. And we have to understand na hindi lang po defense ang kailangan natin. Given the multi-dimensional intersecting challenges that we face, napakahalaga na i-enhance natin ang economic capabilities natin. And this was through the announcement of the groundbreaking Luzon Economic Corridor, which is very important. And it is, mind you, it is the first initiative under the PGI ng US, and which was announced in 2021 nung nag-meeting po ang G7, so the group of 7 developed countries, including po in Japan. The Philippines is the first country to be able to host this program, and also in line po ito ng Indo-Pacific Economic Framework kung saan din po member ang Philippines. So this has a lot of potential to enhance our investments in the country, to build up our economy pagdating sa mga high-impact projects, and to prepare ourselves to be more resilient amidst itong tinatawag natin chip wars na nangyayari, given that the new domain of international politics would be po centered on semiconductors. So I think that this would be important to build our capabilities. Siyempre po, there are concerns na napakalaking project po ito, would it sustain? I mean, pragmatically speaking, itong funding projects, mostly from the US government, mega funding projects, have faced challenges pagdating sa US Congress. But now we are seeing some positive signs, especially nung in-announce ang $1 billion investment dito sa Philippines ng US Treasury Secretary, Trade Secretary, to invest pagdating sa innovative economy ng Philippines. So these are, of course, important signs. And the fact that Japan is on board, being the largest investor when it comes to infrastructure development sa Southeast Asia, and as sinabi po ni Chairman, rightfully so, na Japanese investments are lauded not because only of its flexibility, but also its sustainability, which is vital for a country like the Philippines in Southeast Asia. So I think that these are positive signs kung ano pong, what we have achieved through this particular summit. So, of course, as I would end, and I would give the floor to Professor De Castro to talk about the implications, it's important to note na ang pinakamalaking challenge natin dito is to sustain this trilateral activity. The continuity is very much important amidst yung mga changes na nangyayari po within our national political systems. The US will be having its elections, etc. So, these are normal concerns na makakontinue ba ito. So, I've always believed na kailangan natin sustain ito through a whole-of-a-nation cooperative arrangement. For example, kailangan po natin nang i-ensure na network-based lagi ang engagements natin. Meaning that the three stakeholders must always be present in terms of engaging or cooperating on issues na nagtatouch sa area of concern ng trilateral na ito. And second is to involve yung mga local politicians natin, yung mga bureaucrats, policymakers. Because usually, yung challenges po, galing po sa kanila when it comes to implementing foreign policies. So to bring them on board, to let them talk with one another, is crucial para po malaman din nila kung ganun kalaki po ang stakes natin in ensuring the continuity of this trilateral. But I'd like to end in stating that contrary to misperception, hindi po ito an arrangement to provoke the status quo. It is mainly to defend what is left of the status quo. And that's very much important. Given the turmoil that we are all facing today, it is very much important to maintain and secure this established order kung saan po nakasalalay ang position natin, particularly in the West Philippine Sea. So this is to our interest. When it comes to Beijing, we engage with Beijing continuously in all levels. But it's all about engaging in this regard. So, maraming pong salamat.
Okay. Let's give the floor to Professor De Castro to add to what already been said about
Okay.
the bilateral meeting.
I'll focus primarily on the three implications, no, itong trilateral meeting, no. Number one, of course, it creates a link between two alliances, no. Kasi dalawang alyansa, yan, no. Una-una, yung Philippine-US 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty, no. At of course, yung pinaka-importante sa tingin ng Amerika, no, pag tinitignan nila yung region, ayun yung importansya ho ng US-Japan security relationship of 1960. So, nalilink yan ngayon together, no? Ano implication yan? Number one, of course, in terms of coordination ng tatlong bansa, no? In terms of providing assistance to the Philippines, in terms of maritime cooperative activities na maaaring gawin, in terms of balikatan exercise. So, walang bagong ginawa, kundi pinagdikit nyo lang. Kumbaga, pinagkilala nyo ang dalawang pares na mag-asawa. Na sabi nyo, dapat nyo alagaan yung bahay. So, nangyari to, no? Pangalawa ho, it provides for a holistic approach regarding security, no? Ayon nga sa ating presidente, no, hindi tayo magkakaroon talaga ng national security kung wala tayong economic security. Hindi natin mapupundahan ang sandatahang lakas, ma-modernize ang sandatahang lakas kung hindi mayaman at malakas ang ating ekonomiya. So, paano ba ito nagagawa? No? Nag-umpisa yung summit, no, by President Joe Biden reaffirming the Mutual Defense Treaty with the Philippines and of course, the treaty commitment to Japan. Kasi nakikita natin palagi pag nagkakaroon ng gulo sa West Philippine Sea, South China Sea, o palagi tayo na lang binubuli ng China, mali ho yun. Pati yung napakalakas na bansa ng Japan, binubuli ng China. Sinasakop ng China ang Senkaku Island. Nagkakaroon na, since 2012, nagkakaroon ng confrontation ang Japanese Coast Guard at of course, ang Chinese Coast Guard. Hindi lang nga nila babomba yung Japanese Coast Guard kasi matibay yung Japanese Coast Guard. Of course, the Japanese Coast Guard, ang Japan, nagbibigay sa atin ng barko. Pero nangyayari na yun, no? Matinas lang nga yung Japan, talagang pinaharapan nila at medyo ingat din ang China. Ngayon, papasok na of course sa Japan. And of course, isa rin issue na dapat din natin malaman, hindi lang Senkaku o South China Sea ang gusto sakupin ng China, pati Taiwan. So nakalagay yan, makikita nyo sa statement, bakit may mention ng Taiwan? So I can't imagine bakit ngayon nagninit sa Beijing, no? Itong mga to, itong tatlo na to, hindi lang tayo gusto pag-isahan sa South China Sea, West Philippine Sea, sa South China Sea, pati pa sa Taiwan. So kung titignan nyo yung joint statement, nandun yung Taiwan. Pero yung sabi nga ng ating presidente, hindi tayo magkakaroon ng national security or tinatawag natin traditional geopolitical kung economic security. So kung titignan natin yung joint statements, no, meron dyan 5 na link sa economy. Magpo-focus lang siguro ko sa 3 na napaka-importante. Minimension ni Sir kanina yung importante ng infrastructure. Part ng program, no, I think to emphasize this, yung paggawa ng tinatawag natin Luzon Corridor. Ililink ko ang Olongapo sa Angeles, tas down ho sa Manila, papuntang Batangas City. Major infrastructure development ho dyan. Hindi lang ho rail system, kasama ho ang port, highway, and even digital. So, talaga ho, na maliliko talaga yung ekonomiya ng Central Luzon at yung ekonomiya ng Metro Manila, kasama na ho yung Southern Tagalog ho. So, this will be linked. Ayun ho yung kulang talaga natin infrastructure. And this will be addressed ho by this project, no? Bakit nag-focus sila doon? Natatandaan nyo naman ho, nung pumunta ho yung dating presidente natin sa China noong October 2016, pinangakuan niya ho siya nung kanyang gentleman's partner. No? $26 billion. Tandaan nyo yun, di ba? No, pagdating ho ng dating presidente, pagdating dito, binigyan ako ng partner ko, ng gentleman's partner ko, $26 billion. Tanong ho natin, nasaan yung mga projects na yun? Nakakita ho ba tayo ng rail project sa Mindanao? Nakakita ho ba tayo ng rail project connecting Angeles and tapos yung sa Laguna ho? Wala nang nangyari. Sabi nga ni Sir, Japan pa rin ho ang nagpupundo and we will expect more Japanese funding. Isa lang ho yan. Pangalawa, yung importante ng semiconductor production. I emphasize, high-end semiconductor chips. Tatlong bansa ang nagpo-produce ng high-end semiconductor chips na dependent pa rin ho ang China ho doon. Una ho, yung South Korea. Pangalawa, Netherlands. Pangatlo, yung ating kapitbahay, Taiwan. Ang pinakamalaki ho, located sa Taiwan. Nung pumunta ho si Secretary Anthony Blinken ho sa Pilipinas a couple of weeks ago, natatandaan niyo ho, pagkatapos niyang bumisita sa Malacanang, pumunta ho siya sa Alabang. At doon nalaman natin na meron palang nagpo-produce ho doon ng high-end semiconductor chips. Hindi yung ordinary, yun. Importante yung high-end ho yun. Ayun ho yung ginagamit sa mga cellphone, sa mga laptop, and more importantly ho, sa mga weapon system. Sa mga cruise missiles, sa mga high-end 5th generation fighter planes, sa lahat ho na ginagamit pagdating ho sa digmaan, dependent po ngayon. Drones, dependent po ngayon sa high-end semiconductor chips. I-develop po natin yun. Hindi lang ho i-develop yung production capacity, importante rin ho yung training ho. Thousands of Filipinos will train in the United States, will train in Japan. So we'll have a massive infusion of technology ho dito. Pangako ho dyan. No? Isa na lang ho, very important ho, yung tinatawag natin, ano ba yung issue regarding strategic minerals? Mayaman ho ang Pilipinas, lalo na ho pagdating sa natural minerals. So in terms of nickel, cobalt, na minimina ho natin to, pero ano ba nangyari ho dito? Siniship natin diretso sa China, meron pang putik, meron pang lupa. So ganun ho ang nangyari. Ngayon ho, mag-establish ho tayo ng product processing facilities, ipoprocess na ho yun dito, hindi na natin bibenta sa China, pag nagalit na naman ho sa atin ng China, alam niyo naman ho, ginawa na sa saging natin noong 2012. So, dito na ho, ipoprocess, that will generate jobs for Filipinos. So, we will have enough jobs that there's no need for Filipinos to be exported abroad as OFWs. So I'll just emphasize yan. Meron pa ho dyan tinatawag yung renewable energy at yung tinatawag natin ho yung resilient economy. Ang purpose ho ng resilient economy, yung tatlong ekonomiya ho, Japan, US, at Pilipinas, pagdudugtungin ho yun para hindi na ho tayo dependent sa China. Marami ho sa ating mga kababayan, no? Na kamukha natin, nagsasalita ng Pilipino, pero ang sinasabi palagi, pag inaway natin ng China, maapektuhan ang ating ekonomiya. Probably in the short term, but in the long term, no, because we won't anymore be tied economically to China. We will have our economic ties diversified. Lalo na sa mga bansa na nag-share ho tayo ng ating tinatawag nating rules-based, yung values natin ng liberal democracy, at alam mo natin na hindi tayo iipitin pag nakatunggali huli natin sila. So, ayun ho yung mangyari. Ang pinakahuli na lang ho, ano ba yung end result ho ito, no? Of course, marami sa atin nagiging concern. Paano pag nanalo si Donald Trump? Pagkakaroon ng pagbabago ngayon sa Amerika. So, of course, ang reality ho, nasa labas ang Amerika ng Indo-Pacific. No? Ang importante ho talaga dito, makikita natin ang important role ho ngayon ng Japan. Minention ni Asset, importante ang Japan in terms of our infrastructure development. So, sooner or later ho, makikita natin importante rin ang Japan pagdating sa security. This is of course something that is, for the Japanese, this is something new. Kasi alam naman ho, very much aware ang mga Hapono kung ano yung ginawa nila noong Second World War. Meron silang pacifist constitution, wala ho silang armed forces, meron ho silang self-defense force. Pero ngayon ho, na-realize na ng Japan, na talaga ho, threat talaga, kung na medyo nahihiya tayo na sabihin ng China, ang threat sa atin, ang mga Hapono hindi. Sinasabi nila, talagang China, at of course North Korea. So last year, in-increase nila ang defense budget nila by 2%, at in-announce din mo nila hindi man aliado ho, makipag-establish sila ng security partnership sa mga ilang bansa. Ang pinaka-inuna ho nila dito sa Southeast Asia, ang Pilipinas. Priority nila. Binentahan na ho tayo ng radar, binigyan na ang ating Navy ng TC-90. Sooner or later ho, baka magbenta na rin ho sila sa atin ng mga tinatawag natin lethal weapons. Sana lang ho, huwag nila isama si Voltes 5. Pero gano'n ho talaga, masingasin. Yung mga generation ho namin. So, ayun ho yung implication natin. Makikita ho natin ang more proactive role ng Japan. Kasi iba ho ang Japan sa Amerika. Ang Amerika ho hindi part ng region. Ang Japan ho, part ho ng region natin. At part ng Japan, mention si Sir ng geopolitics, nung tinatawag natin first island chain. Mga bansa o isla na magkakatikit, kaharapan China, at ngayon ho, biktima ng China sa kanyang aggression. Nasa taas ho niya ng Japan, sa baba ang Taiwan, at sa baba ang Pilipinas. Ang Japan ho hindi makakaalis dito sa region dahil part siya. So ayun ho yung third implication. This is something that we have to watch for. Kaya bago ho nagkaroon ng trilateral meeting ho, minute ho ni President Joe Biden si Prime Minister Kishida, at si Prime Minister Kishida ho nag-deliver ng speech sa US Congress. Kumbaga, inaano sa ng Japan din, tinatanggap ng Japan na Japan will take a very active role in the region. So, ano ba yung kahat na dito? Hindi pa rin natin alam kasi yung joint statement doesn't provide for any institution nor there's a need for, let's say, a institution or what, wala. I will just take itong ano yung sinabi ng Presidente, na this will be just the beginning of more meetings. Eka nga, pag nanonood tayo ng telenovela, abangan natin ang susunod na kabanata. Maraming salamat po sa inyo.
Sige.
Thank you, Professor. After this, meron tayong second part. Ang topic naman natin sa jeepney modernization. Kasi baka nalilimutan natin, sa April 15, baka ito ay yung final among the deadlines. Yung sa consultation.
April 30.
30. Yung 15 pala sa e-bike. At nandiyan na po si Yusek Ortega na doon. But anyway, kasama po natin si Mr. Joshua Espeña. He is the Vice President ng IDSC, International Development and Security Cooperation. Isa po itong think tank na malaki ang expertise sa international relations at sa national and global security.
Magandang umaga po. I think I have to add some of the things na hindi nila masabi. Kasi I really enjoyed yung discussions ng ating co-panel. So I think important yung makita niya while this is a trilateral, na sinasabi natin that this is the age of foreign policy na kung saan dapat flexible tayo sa ating mga choices. Ang importante makita natin dito is one, syempre dapat ma-institutionalize siya. And pangalawa, hindi na tayo magmamaang-maangan. Ang trilateral summit is one of the pathways of which is to increase the interoperability of our armed forces. We have to understand that battle systems have to talk to each other. Hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na we are going to help each other kung ang ating doctrines, tactics, these things are not interoperable. Right? Madali lang sabihin ng mga diplomats, ng mga politicians that we will help each other. Pero we have to take into account the reality. On the ground, in the water, at sea, we are looking at a future type of modern warfare na dapat prepared tayo dito ng which is why a trilateral summit such as this is important to address what scenario in the future for warfare should look like. Of course, hindi natin gusto mangyari ito, but we have to be ready. See this Spanish parabellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. That is the peaceful condition that we want to have. Kasi we are sending a kind of deterrent message kay China. Kapag kami ay kinagti mo, handa kami sama-sama. So, which is why a trilateral summit must be understood as a way to intensify yung ating interoperability. Which is why we really appraise yung mga pagbebenta ng ating mga partners, like-minded partners. Especially, for instance, yung niyagit ni Dr. Licastro na hopefully we can have 5th generation fighters for the Philippine Air Force and also yung logistical capability. Kasi kung makikita natin, I would say, I have to comment this, 2023 was a very, very innovative year for the Philippines. With the assertive transparency campaign. Pero ang nangyayari dito is that China is trying to frame us as a provocateur sa region na ito. Para bang tayo yung nagsisik ng gulo. Whereas nakita nga natin on the ground na tayo yung binubuli. But my comment is that in 2024 and beyond, kailangan hindi na tayo dapat i-frame as a bully. We have to recalibrate our strategic communications with China by, publishing this video. Hindi na dapat tayo binubuli. Umapalag na tayo. And this is exactly what we should communicate to China. Kailangan natin mag-communicate ng isang deterrent capability, which is why kailangan natin ng credibility. Hence, interoperability matters. Kailangan natin to kasi ang nangyayari ngayon sa ating society is that while there are sides na kung saan nag-agree, we really need these things, meron din tayong parts ng society na very anxious of the war. Unfortunately, we had a previous administration for 6 years enculturated, embodied sa ating society that we should be, subservient sa ating aggressive na neighbor, that is China, which is hindi naman dapat. We have become a country na kung saan very polarized ang ating opinions. Some of them are afraid of war, in which I think trilateral summit na nag-occur this week should occur really more into more and more meetings in order to assure ourselves, each other, that we are capable of defending ourselves. Which is why I will really agree with my co-panelists. United States, Japan, all of these industrialized countries would have to assist us in any way possible. But at the same time, the Philippines would need to reassure its partners that we are capable of doing it. Hindi lang tayo nagsasalita. We are able to back all these things with actions. So, at the end of the day, this fight for the West Philippine Sea is part of our developmental goals. Tandaan natin, ang West Philippine Sea ay hindi battleground lamang ng mga great powers. This is the future of our energy and our food security. And I think the Marcos Jr. administration and across administrations would have to communicate this to the Filipino people. Tandaan po natin, hindi lahat ng mga tao ay aware enough, even though unfortunately, the media is very helpful in cascading information. Unfortunately, hindi lahat nabibili sa fight na ito. Para sa kanila kasi, this is something na malayo sa bituka. No? Pero hindi ganun eh. This is food security. This is 25% of our fishing sources. And hindi tayo sure kung yung 25% na yun ay 100% na nakukuha natin. Okay? So, ibig sabihin nito, yung presyo ng galunggong at ng mga isda, ay naaapektuhan hanggang sa household level natin. We need to communicate this because this is part of our development. Hindi tayo nakikipag foreign relations with these in order to claim its fire. But we are trying to assert our place on the map. Kinakailangan natin ma-recalibrate, ma-communicate that we are not puppets of the United States. Nor will be, succumb to the foreign policy objectives of China. We are a sovereign nation state. We have our sense of agency, which is why a trilateral summit meetings is an opportunity. More and more meetings to come to communicate that kind of agency. So I think I'd leave it at that.
Professors, may kasabihan, kaya ko na nakita, biblical pala yun. Hindi ko nagaling sa China. An enemy of my enemy is my friend. Of course, given yung tatlong kalyado sa Pacific, Australia, Japan, US, pwede bang magkaroon ng modification sa ating ibang security, I'm referring to modi sa India. Dahil kalaman din ito ng China. May chance bang magkaroon tayo ng security alliance or security agreement para doon sa pagbibenta ng gramos?
Thank you. We have to understand po na ang bilateral relationship ng Philippines at India has come a long way since 1946-1947. During the initial years, obviously, nagkaroon ng limitation ng bilateral partnership natin mostly dahil sa misunderstanding. We had no direct conflict with one another, pero there was a lack of understanding. Pero fast forward to 2014, when Prime Minister Modi launched yung Act East policy ng India, it was centered on playing a larger role as a security development partner, particularly sa Southeast Asia. And since then, napakaraming arrangements yung mga nangyari between India and South countries. But it was only 2016-2017 when the utility of the Philippines-India partnership was actually seen. To the point na, yun nga po, I think one of the most notable ones would be the BrahMos, but there are so much more na nagawa natin in terms of our bilateral partnership. For example, in counterterrorism, the Philippines was the first recipient of Indian assistance pagdating sa counterterrorism. This is the first time India offered counter-terror assistance to any country. And there is now capacity building measures. So nag-sign na rin po yung MOU between our Philippine and Indian Coast Guards. So, and with the recent visit of the External Affairs Minister, sinabi po ni Dr. J. Shankar kay President Marcos Jr. na we are your ship. To the point na if you're looking for a partner who will stand by you regardless of the consequences, we are there for you. And I think India has come a long way, especially in recognizing the need to adhere to the 2016 arbitral ruling. And going straight to your point po regarding the possibility of including India into an arrangement, I think that it is it's happening to the point that India is also a very close partner of the US, Japan, and Australia. India is dubbed as a major defense partner since 2016 in the US. It has a global, special, comprehensive strategic partnership with Japan, and it has a comprehensive strategic partnership with Australia. And they engage in a lot of areas, particularly sa Quad and in Malabar exercises, which was extended with Australia. Now, what are the opportunities to have the Philippines in? Actually, in 2019 po, nagkaroon ng first naval drill between India, the Philippines, Japan, and the US in the South China Sea. 2019 po yan. And since then, tumaas din po ang number ng maritime security cooperative arrangements ng Indian Navy, Indian Coast Guard, Philippine Navy, Philippine Coast Guard. But what we can see here is that pwedeng pumasok ang India through sub-regional arrangements. For example, Japan and India, meron po silang tinatawag na 2+1 framework. So third-party framework siya. So this is where they provide developmental assistance. The India and Japan have been working with countries in South Asia, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, sa Africa, meron pong Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, with Vietnam. So I think very possible na magkaroon ng close synergy between Japan, India, and the Philippines.
So, Professor, paano magiging reliable alay ang India? Itong India at saka itong Vietnam, meron silang strict adherence kung sa trainers o apat na no military alliance, no siding, kapag nakipaglaban ng ibang bansa. Hindi ba limiting factor?
Well, I don't think so po, because we have to understand India as it's the fifth largest economy right now, the fourth largest in terms of military power projection, and is geared towards being third. And malayo na po yung narating ng India in terms of yung policy shift niya from non-alignment during the Cold War period to now it's multi-alignment, to the point which opens more options. And in fact po, interestingly mentioned, yes, we foreknows on Vietnam, pero Vietnam now has a reciprocal logistics pact with India. The first time. So India has access to Vietnamese bases then. So this shows us that based sa situation, India is now realizing na very much interconnected ang security dynamics ng South China Sea at ng Indian Ocean, and as it is trying to position itself as a voice of the global South, kailangan din po niya mag-act on the situations that we're facing. So we're seeing more activity. Meron na pong new joint exercises between India and Indonesia, India and Vietnam, and now nag-promise po ang Indian side that we will increase our activity with the Philippines. So I think we have good signs for the long term.
Thank you. I think ang comment ko dito is that I remember one of my conversations sa isang Indian naval captain. Sabi niya, Joshua, tell us what we need. Don't expect us na mag-uusap tayo and alam ko na magically kung anong kailangan mo. Kailangan mo sabihin sa akin what do you really need. So I think the mga exercises, engagements like these are just starters. I think we need better people in place, no? In terms of, telling our counterparts, especially with India, kung ano yung kailangan natin. Kasi, as I have observed, and Don has perfectly laid this out, meron ng mga conditions, no? Na kung saan we can work together. But I think ang nangyayari kasi dito is that I would take more issue on the Philippine side because we have been, too nagne-neglect tayo sa ating gustong gawin with our external defense. Now that we are seeing a shift in our priority, that is external defense, I think we're seeing more opportunities to tell our Indian counterparts what do we really need. Which is why, kung titignan natin yung Vietnamese model, they have a clear policy stance on what they want to do and saan papasok yung partners na yon. I think the Philippines needs to understand that when you talk about alliances, you have to be clear in communicating what you want and ano yung maaaring trade-off nito. Kailangan mo tanggapin yon. Kailangan mo i-accept ang risks ng trade-offs na yon. Kasi ang nangyayari sa atin is that we are too shy, masyado tayong nahihiya na mag-ask kung ano yung kailangan natin. Kailangan natin yung communicate ng tama yun. Exercises, mangyayari yan, pero maraming sa mga exercises na to at the operational tactical level, even people-to-people, staff-to-staff discussions, hindi sila makakapag-usap ng tama kasi nagpiprevent tayo na alam na nila kung ano kailangan natin. In consistency doon sa aking sinasabi that we are trying to assert our agency, dito natin makikita dapat that we really need to tell our counterparts what we really need. Sa Amerika, sa Japan, I think nagagawa na natin yon. Kailangan na natin hindi mahiya makipag-communicate sa ating Indian counterparts because structural conditions have given us the opportunity to do so.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to add, we have to remember that India is an important economic partner currently of the Philippines. In fact, I've met with the former Indian ambassador and we're waiting for a new person to come in. I believe in the next couple of weeks, I was told. But anyway, we have brought the ambassador to the DOTR and met also with Secretary Jimmy Bautista. The Indian group, together with its business group, they have an Indian Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines, wanted to propose a railway project in the Philippines. So, India is an important ally of the Philippines economically. And like what I said kanina and what our professors have mentioned, we cannot be militarily strong until we are economically strong. So if we have allies, economic allies, that we can count on to build our infrastructure projects, this will then grow our potential and make us stronger militarily. When you talk about yung conversations with China, the US and Japan, really we're not in favor of escalating your tension, right? That's not the point, The point here is that as Filipinos, we should be standing our ground, We don't, parang school bully, example, The more you allow for them to bully you, the more they will bully you, So, it's not really fighting back. It's just, you have to stand up for yourself, And as Filipinos, at the end of the day, we should all be standing up for the rights of every Filipino, our co-Filipinos, and we should all be ready, for any eventuality. If you love your country, you have to be prepared to die for your country, And I think that's what all of us are saying. Here, we have to just, parang yun yung end result of what everyone's trying to explain. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Ano gagawin? Okay na natin ang floor?
Yes, please.
Siguro, limit natin to 10 minutes.
Sir, for Sir Michael. About NSCR po, ilan percent na yung progress rate natin?
Okay. Kasi they're broken down into 3 separate areas. The Northern Line, that's more than 50% finished. However, I can confidently say that the stations itself or themselves, and I don't know how many stations from Clark all the way to Bulacan, but there are several, at least more than 10. These are 80 to 85% complete. Kaya mabilis na lang yan, sir. I predict that by 2026, maybe even 2027, we can already start to run trial trains. Hence, before the elections of 2028, we can open up that line in full operational mode. Metro Manila, we're currently in the process of doing 3 things. Number 1, we're doing the fencing activities. Nilalagyan po ng fences yung mga areas so that hindi na po madadaanan ng mga tao at hindi na pwedeng may titira doon o whatever. Isa-secure. There you go. Isa-secure yung mga areas. Number 2, track removal. Why are we removing the tracks? Because we're constructing the new tracks. Kasi yung mga lumang tracks, they'll all be migrated to other areas like in the south, in Quezon and in Bicol. And then thirdly, we have to start doing clearing operations. Diyan na papasok yung mga ROW concerns, and like I mentioned kanina, it will have to be done person to person on a case-by-case basis. And then of course, Laguna, from Alabang all the way to Calamba, Laguna. This entire project from Clark to Calamba, Laguna is a 147-kilometer stretch funded both by JICA, I mentioned kanina, and ADB. We project for the entire line to be finished by 2028 and to be inaugurated before that by President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Mapapangako ko po na may mai-inaugurate, at maipapangako ko na gagawin namin ang lahat para matapos yung target date na ibinigay sa amin ng ating mahal na Pangulo. But definitely, the Northern Line will operate before or by 2027. Thank you, sir.
Just a follow-up. Dito sa Metro Manila and Alabang, Calamba, kailan yung start ng construction?
Ngayon po, siguro by October, tapos na yung fencing and track removal activities. So, construction immediately follows. Obviously, we cannot construct unless, we handle the right-of-way issues. And that's where the challenges come in. Kasi iba-iba per area. Bawa, dito sa Blumentritt, iba problema. Sa Sukat, iba problema. Sa Divisoria, sa Cabeza. So, this will have to be handled on a case-by-case basis. Una, gaano karami informal settlers na ililipat? Ikalawa, saan sila ililipat? Ikatlo, ano yung mga requirements? Bawat lugar. Iba-iba po yan. And the DOTR, at dito, may mga DOTR co-workers in the DOTR tayo, and the PNR, I can say, all accepted that we're all hard at work, in doing our best to resolve the ROW issues.
Sir, sa north part, ilang percent na yung right of way?
53. Sa northern part, yung right of way issues, almost tapos na lahat yan. Siguro, I would say, mga 90% finished na. Lahat ng right of way issues na resolved na. It's just a matter siguro of some of the areas, baka nasa financial aspect na lang yung babayaran na lang. Pero lahat ng negotiations have all been completed na. Kasi hindi naman matatapos sa 50% kung hindi maayos yan.
Metro Manila, tapos sir, sa Alabang,
sabay pong ginagawa ang Metro Manila and South. Metro Manila to Laguna, sabay na tunaka. Umpisahan, sabay na tatapusin. Sir?
Hindi, may tatanong doon ako sa tatlo. When we talk of this bilateral, trilateral, or multilateral military alliances, by way of comparison, do we foresee an Asian NATO in this direction? That's my first question. And my second question, considering the inclusion of the economic dimension or economic integration of these economies here in East Asian region, do you foresee the rise of a region state just like the European Union or European Economic Community?
Okay. Well, I'll answer your question, sir. Bakit ba nagkaroon ng NATO sa Europe dito sa Asia? Wala. Sa NATO, nagkaroon talaga ng clear and present danger in a form of Soviet expansionism. Clear and present danger nandun ho yung Soviet Army, tapos lalo na ho nung na-develop ng Soviet Union yung nuclear weapons niya in 1949. So talaga, ayun ang cause niyan, the fact na meron ng threat. Dito sa atin ho, hindi nagkaroon ng NATO dahil wala talagang clear and present danger noon eh. Nagkaroon lang ho ng revolution sa China, 1949, pero hindi papawan ang China noon. Kaya lang naman talaga nagkaroon ng alliance po noon, talaga natatakot tayo sa Japan. Kasi bibigyan na ng independence sa Japan. Ang sagot ko dyan sa inyo, kung magkakaroon ng Asia NATO, depende ho sa China. Kung talagang sasakupin ng China ho ang South China Sea at gagamitan ho tayo ng dahas at lalo na papasukin niya Taiwan, hindi ko i-discount na magkaroon ho talaga ng Asia NATO. Kasi alliances are created not because the countries in the region like each other. Alliances are formed because we are faced with a common threat. So, ang talagang magdi-decide ho niya. Pero ang China ho talaga, kumbaga ho yan nang aaway lahat eh. Nasa opisina tayo, awayin tayo lahat. Tapos pag nagkapi-kapi tayo, sasabihin ng China, bakit niyo ako pinagkakapihan? Hindi sinisisa ng China ang kanyang sarili. Lahat kayo, kaaway ko, dahil salbahe kayo, pinagtutulungan niyo ako. Hindi natin ng China, galit kayo sa akin dahil sinasakop ko ang teritoryo niyo. Sir, a short answer ko dyan. Asian NATO would emerge if China would pursue its expansionist and coercive policy. Ayun ang sagot ko. Siguro magkakaroon na rin ng economic integration, Kasi sasabihin natin, lagi natin sinasabi, economically dependent tayo sa China. Pero recently, nagkakaroon na ng tawag natin decoupling. Japan slowly, unang-una dyan, Amerika, at dapat na i-consider na natin na talagang delikado na ilagay mo natin lahat ng ating itlog sa isang basket sa China. Lalo na, may mga Pilipino ho tayo, isa pa ho doon. May madaming malls, di ba ho, dito sa Pilipinas. Hindi ko na babakalabamin yung pangalan niya. So, hindi na tayo mag-iisip na yung matipwede yung business interest natin dahil nasa China. Kung yung business interest natin nakakarato sa India, sa Japan, sa South Korea, sa Taiwan, we don't have to be concerned about our economic dependence or interdependence sa China. Ayun lang po yung sagot ko sa inyo. Philip.
Sige, isang question na lang siguro before we move to another topic.
Okay.
And the three, si Professor De Castro na-mention po kanina yung gentleman's agreement. Meron po kasi sinabi si Justice Carpio na kapag sinunod natin itong supposed agreement na ito, then we would be essentially be giving up a Ayungin Shoal. Do you share the same sentiments, sir?
Kami lahat. Short lang, I agree with Justice Carpio kasi yung gentleman's agreement na ho yun talaga actually favors China. It does not freeze the status quo. Kasi pag release yung status quo, nabubulong na ho yung BRP Sierra Madre. So ayun lang talaga actually naantay ng China. So actually, maintaining the status quo favors China. And we felt the former president, if there's such a thing really as a gentleman's agreement, fell to the Chinese trap. And it's also a betrayal on his position as the commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Kasi ang presidente, kung commander-in-chief kayo, yung mga tao nyo, ibibiwis ang buhay nila, papabayaan nyo ng yung comfort nila at welfare nila sa isang nabubulok na Second World War landing ship plan. So, again, ayun ho yun talaga kung it's really the gentleman agreement actually freezes the situation, and if a frozen situation actually favors China, then it's really tantamount to treachery or betrayal not only of the national interest, but betrayal of his role as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Thank God our current President is very much aware of his responsibility to the Filipino nation and of course his obligation as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Kung nire-supply natin yung mga marines natin doon, Responsibility natin yon at walang pakialam ang China. Kasi hindi pag-aari ng China ang kalagatan sa paligid ng Ayungin Show. I'll ask my colleagues ano yung opinion nila.
Thank you, Professor. I think Professor De Castro said it perfectly well. Just to add very briefly that this is indeed, if such an agreement is in place, it's a clear violation of what we stand for as Filipinos, and a clear violation of the very heart of what it is to be a Filipino. So this is in fact a grave mistake in terms of our national interest, and also the challenges that we would face in terms of our socio-economic rights, and of course the rights of every Filipino person. So again, exactly the same thing that Professor Cash said.
Just to interject personal note, Professor Gil was born and raised in the Philippines.
Filipino citizen ba yan?
Filipino citizen, yes. Is that a foreigner? Yes.
Bukod sa it is really a treacherous move, kailangan din natin kung bakit may iba sa ating mga kababayan ay parang mas okay na to than going into OR, because I think ang nangyayari is that we have placed a wrong assumption. Kapag walang gulo, payapa, okay ang buhay. Pero kailangan natin ma-ascertain dito is that the Filipino society will have to understand, we have to know and understand, what to identify kung ano yung interest natin. Sa tingin kasi natin, by giving up itong ating sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea will make our lives any better. Unfortunately, hindi po. As I mentioned kanina, this is in pursuit, inconsistent sa ating developmental goals. So yung gentleman's agreement, pag na-honor yan ng ating Philippine side, will be a precedent for more agreements niya doon sa mga regional states. So we cannot allow the Philippines to become an example of how yung aggressor ay allow itself na makuha niya ang gusto. We have to put if anything, an axis of resistance. Pero sa ngayon ang nangyayari in the Southeast Asian region, we are putting up a long fight, which is why we are diversifying our partners beyond ASEAN. Which is why yung developmental goals natin, balik lang tayo ulit sa Trilateral Summit, it is a means for us to get our national interest. This is about the Filipino people's food security and energy security. A gentleman's agreement, hindi po pwede na magdesisyon ng isang tao para sa kinabukasan ng mga Pilipino.
Last na talaga, si Dan Mariano.
Scope idea, geopolitical arrangements. Why has that Vietnam, which is obviously the most active in defending its sovereignty against Chinese aggression, why hasn't Vietnam figured in this dialogue?
Historically, historically o ngayon ho? Unang-una ho, policy ng Vietnam, ayaw niya ng alliance.
So, magaling ba kanila na doon?
Kung determinado yung bawat Vietnamese lumaban at mamatay talagang policy talaga nila yun.
Which means hindi na
Kasi ang case ng Vietnam.
Yes. For 2,000 years.
They've been fighting. Pero sa atin kasi pati din ng China, ng Vietnam
Kaya nga, katabi sila ng China.
Kaya pero tayo, meron tayong luxury kasi archipelago tayo Saka of course, historically po,
gusto na geopolitical analysis ko kanina, binanggit yung spoken hub. Bakit hindi nag-figure ang Vietnam dito?
Historically
No, I think it was Professor
meron hong security partnership at least ang Vietnam, even with the US and Japan.
Do they have a trilateral arrangement also?
Wala Kasi again, it's a matter of the Vietnamese policy. It's the policy of the Vietnamese Communist Party. Kasi every time the Vietnamese makes a decision, they also factor in yung relationship nila with China. Kasi at least ayun yung advantage ng Vietnam in dealing with China. Pag medyo pinipitit ng Vietnam ang China o pumapalag sila, the Chinese will also have to take into account komunista pa rin to. Ayun ang wala tayo
Maybe that's part of the solution. Kasi China is clear that it is regimes that are democratic.
Yeah, you know, sa factor
Leadership
niya.
change,
Ayan yung factor daw.
Dari itong financial years, pag maging presidente ulit si Donald Trump, patay na naman yan.
Kaya yung tinatawag nating hubs and spoke, meron nung triangular element po yan eh.
Yung nga gusto ko sa ating talakayin na involve natin ang Vietnam kung magagawa natin sa usapan nito. Parating din.
Pwede yun. Pero of course, ang issue talaga yung tatlo yan eh, no? Yung triangle, no? Una-una, ang pinakatapo niyan, kaya talaga may hub and spoke, do we share the common values? Do we have election? Is our government characterized by a multi-partisan? Are Filipinos, Japanese, Taiwanese, South Koreans have their civil liberties? We asked the Vietnamese about it. Definitely wala. Pangalawa, yung tinatawag natin, do we observe common norms? International law. Vietnam, yes. No? Pang pinaka-base po niyan, yung common interest natin. Vietnam would actually fit yung dalawa. Adherence to international norms, yung common interest, ang concern natin China. Pero pag pinakadating mo doon sa dulo, yung common values, doon mo yata nagkakaroon ng konting problema. Kasi Vietnam is still a communist country like China. Ayun yung sagot ko po sa inyo.
Sige. Meron pa tayong second group of guests galing sa DOTR. Di-discuss nila yung jeepney modernization program, which is supposed to end by the end of the month. At this point, we'd like to thank our guest, Renato De Castro, from De La Salle, Don McLean Gill, also of De La Salle, saka yung, anong pangalan niya?
Joshua. Mula sa think tank IDS.
Okay. Yung second part natin, nandito si DOTR USEC, first name? Ortega. USEC Ortega. Saka mga representatives ng jeepney, nandito. So, thank you for the three gentlemen.
Ating mga guests, sabi niyo yung approach.